The rain came down like nails. It hammered the cracked asphalt, the decaying city walls, and the back of my rain-soaked trench coat as I hunched over the glistening heap on the ground. Not a heap, really. A body. Or what was left of one. The stiff, grey-hued skin bore witness to weeks, maybe months, in the dank undercity morgue. Not that we bothered with the formalities of cold storage anymore. With the necromantic energy surging through Veilstone like a rotten heartbeat, even a corpse left in a ditch came back. Reanimated, they were set to toil for the betterment of the city. Or that's what the councilmen croaked about from their gilded balconies. This one was different. This one had a hole the size of my fist punched clean through the chest. Not a bite, not a ragged wound made by some back-alley ghoul. This looked deliberate, which raised the question no one wanted whispered. What could kill something already dead? Kane! A voice cut through the downpour. One I knew too well. Burly, gruff, not an ounce of patience in it. I straightened, wincing as my back protested, and turned. Captain Andras stormed towards me, his heavy boots splashing puddles with every step. His weathered face was creased deeper than usual, and the flame of mage light he held sputtered a nervous green in his grip. Thought I'd told you to clear out, not gawk at a stiff. He shoved past me, a man-shaped boulder splattered with mud. I'm not gawking, Captain. This one's been tampered with. He grunted and crouched beside the corpse, his mage light illuminating the wound in harsh detail. Mutilated, maybe. Animals get hungry. You think a rat gnawed a hole like this? I gestured at the clean edges. It looked like a fist had punched through the rotting flesh. Andras glared, his beard bristling in the damp air. Doesn't take an investigator to spot scavengers, Kane. That's what I used to be. An investigator. Before the dead started getting back up. Before those with a spark of magic got pressed into the city ward, keeping a leash on the restless dead and squashing the cults that kept popping up like corpse blooms. Then indulge me, Captain, I said, my voice tight. When was the last time a rat had the muscle to punch through a ribcage? The mage light fluctuated in Andras's hand, sputtering from green to sickly yellow. You think... He glanced around the alleyway, the shadows thick and clinging. You think one of them went... feral? Or this is something different, something worse? Andras stood abruptly. Don't speak nonsense, boy. There ain't nothing worse than the shamblers we deal with daily. He wiped rain from his face, smearing mud across his cheek. Report this as animal damage. Get sanitation down here to clear it out. And for the abyss's sake, Kane, get some sleep. You're starting to see ghosts. He stalked back towards the alley mouth, his heavy steps breaking the silence. I remained, staring down at the corpse. The mage lights in the distance resembled dying fireflies, and the rain was the only sound. Or so I thought. A whisper, soft as the breeze, slithered across my skin. Not words, just a faint moan carried on the wind. I jerked my head up. There. Another movement deeper in the alley. Not an animal, not human. Something hunched and twisted. And definitely not something supposed to be up and walking. My hand instinctively went for the hilt of my knife, a dull ache in my gut reminding me it was the only weapon I had left after the purge. Useless against anything truly dangerous. Backing away silently, I kept my eyes on the shifting shadows. The moan came again. Closer this time. A wet, rasping sound that sent chills down my spine. The stench of decay hit me then, sharp and acrid, overriding even the metallic tang of rain. The alley twisted and narrowed ahead, choked with overflowing garbage bins. Perfect cover if I could reach it. Adrenaline surged through me, pushing aside the bone-deep exhaustion. I lunged for the nearest bin, the flimsy metal groaning under my weight as I shoved it sideways, creating a barrier. Crouched behind the reeking barricade, I held my breath, listening. My heart hammered a frantic counterpoint to the rain. Silence, Then, a scraping sound, like claws dragging over stone. It was close, impossibly close. I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing the city morgue, the rows of freshly reanimated bodies, their vacant eyes and the unnatural twitch of their limbs. But this wasn't one of them. This was different. A wrongness emanated from it, a sense of purpose beyond the mindless hunger of the reanimated. A low growl rumbled from behind the bin. I forced myself to stay still, every muscle tensed. The stench hit me again, stronger now, laced with something else, a metallic tang that made my stomach churn. Suddenly, the bin beside me lurched. I flinched, expecting claws to tear through the cheap metal. Instead, a sickening thud landed on the bin lid directly above me. My breath hitched. The weight was immense, pushing down, the metal groaning in protest. Panic clawed at my throat. There was nowhere to go. Another growl, closer this time, a wet rasp against the metal. This thing was toying with me, I realized, with a jolt of terror. I had to act, now! With a surge of desperate energy, I lunged forward, grabbing the bin lid with both hands and shoving it upwards with all my might. The creature on top roared in surprise, the sound raw and primal. The stench hit me full force as the bin lid gave way, revealing a glimpse of what lay beneath. It wasn't human, not anymore. The body was a disturbing parody of a man, muscles bulging and contorted, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Its skin, a sickly grey, was stretched taut over the warped bone structure, and glowing red veins snaked beneath the surface. But it was the eyes that chilled me to the bone. Intelligent, malevolent crimson orbs that locked onto mine with a predatory gleam. We stared at each other for a heartbeat, a tableau of raw terror and monstrous hunger. Then, with a bestial snarl, the creature lunged. I barely dodged in time, rolling to the side as a razor-sharp claw swiped through the air where my head had been. It roared again, its fury filling the narrow alley. Scrambling to my feet, I bolted towards the alley mouth, the creature's heavy footfalls pounding behind me. I could hear its ragged breaths, smell the fetid air it displaced. The rain had turned into a downpour, obscuring my vision. The alley ahead was a dark tunnel, the streetlights mere blurry orbs in the distance. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but I pushed myself harder. This thing wouldn't stop. A wet hand, cold and impossibly strong, clamped onto my shoulder. I shrieked, twisting around as the creature loomed over me, its face contorted in a bizarre parody of a grin. Just when I thought it was over, a deafening crack split the air. The creature froze, its head snapping towards the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows at the mouth of the alley. Captain Andras, his face grim, held a smoking relic pistol in his hand. The creature hissed, a sound of pure hatred, before turning and melting back into the shadows, its heavy footfalls fading into the drumming rain. Andras lowered the pistol, his face etched with a mixture of surprise and grim satisfaction. "Thought I told you to get some sleep, Kane." His voice was gruff, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. I slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. My entire body ached, but I was alive. "Looks like you owe me an apology, Captain." He snorted, a humorless sound. "Maybe so. But next time try not to pick fights with things that shouldn't die easily." He holstered the pistol and extended a calloused hand towards me. I took it, hauling myself back to my feet. My legs wobbled, the shock finally catching up with me. "I didn't pick a fight," I said, through gritted teeth. "It picked me." Andras narrowed his eyes, rainwater dripping from his thick brows. "You sure about that? You always did have a knack for finding trouble, kid." He wasn't wrong. Ever since I'd been recruited into the city ward, trouble had been my constant companion. Only, this was different. This reeked of something darker, something far more dangerous than the mindless dead we policed. "Captain," I began, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain the look in that creature's eyes, the hunger, the cunning? "That thing back there, it wasn't like the others." He met my gaze, his weathered face etched with grim determination. "I know. Damn it, Kane, I know." We might have a rogue necromancer on our hands, one powerful enough to create something like that. A chill ran down my spine, deeper than any rain could reach. If a rogue necromancer was operating in the city, then the fragile truce between the living and the undead might shatter at any moment. "What now?" I asked. The alley looked even bleaker in the cold light of dawn, slick with rainwater and littered with rotting debris. Andras rubbed his bristly jaw. "Now, we go find out who's messing with forces they don't understand. And you, Kane." He leveled a finger at me. "You start digging. Talk to undertakers, morticians, anyone who deals with the dead. I want to know every whisper of strange happenings on the streets of late." He clapped me on the shoulder, the gesture heavy with unspoken meaning. This was no longer a simple case of vandalism. This was a threat to the city, and I had a feeling things were about to get a whole lot worse before they got better. "And for the love of the abyss, Kane," Andras said, his voice filled with genuine worry now. "Try to stay alive while you do it." The guild morgue reeked of something beyond the usual stench of decay. A metallic tang hung heavy in the air, a sickly sweet undertone that made my stomach churn. Mortician Lazarus, a gaunt man with eyes like dull marbles, shoved a tray overflowing with surgical tools towards me with a grunt. "You want to see the handiwork? Suit yourself, detective, just don't touch anything." I eyed the scalpel glinting in the dim light. The bone saw a rusty silhouette against the grimy window. My gaze darted around the room, taking in the rows of bodies laid out on chipped slabs. The air was thick with the low hum of magical wards, the only thing keeping these corpses cold and still. "Let's hear it again, Lazarus," I said, stepping back from the tray. He didn't look happy to see me, but then again, nobody did these days. Not with the city on edge and whispers of rogue necromancy swirling like smoke in the alleys. Lazarus scratched his balding head with a greasy fingernail. "Found him this morning. Delivery from the 5th precinct. Stiff as a board, magic drained clean. Didn't even twitch when I started prepping him." "Like a normal one?" He gave a humorless snort. "Normal? Nothing's normal anymore, detective. This one, though, something wasn't right." He gestured towards a shrouded figure on the central slab. I moved closer, the wards buzzing faintly under my fingertips. I pulled back the coarse linen, revealing the face of a man, mid-30s, with haunted eyes staring vacantly into the ceiling. Unlike the others, this one didn't bear the grey pallor of a reanimated corpse. His skin held a faint trace of colour, and there were no puncture wounds, no telltale signs of the necromantic energy that flowed through every shambling worker in the city. "No animating mark?" I asked, tracing a calloused finger along the man's jawline. Lazarus shook his head. "Nope. Clean. But there's something off about him. Look closer." I ran my fingers along the man's throat, feeling the faint rasp of stubble. Then I noticed a faint line running across the base of his neck, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. "What's that?" I muttered, tracing the line with my thumb. Lazarus leaned closer, peering at the mark with magnified goggles perched on his forehead. "Looks like stitching. Fine work, barely noticeable. Arcane script, maybe." My breath caught in my throat. Arcane script. That could only mean one thing. Some form of powerful magic had been used on this man. And not just any magic. Something beyond the rudimentary reanimation process used to keep the city running. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine. This wasn't just about a rogue necromancer anymore. This was something far more intricate, something that reeked of a deeper conspiracy. "Who brought him in?" I asked, straightening up. Lazarus shrugged. "No name, no nothing. Just a city guard dropped him off. Said they found him wandering the streets near the Undercity." The Undercity, a maze of tunnels beneath Veilstone, rumoured to be riddled with necromantic cults and worse. "Did they say anything else?" I pressed, a sense of urgency building in my chest. "Just muttered something about eyes glowing in the dark before scarpering out of here faster than a rat with a tail on fire." A cold dread settled over me. The glowing eyes. The creature in the alley. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Lazarus," I said, my voice tight with sudden urgency. "Tell anyone who comes in here asking about this body to send them straight to me. Don't let anyone touch it, not even for reanimation." The mortician blinked, surprised at the intensity in my voice. "You sure, detective? This city runs on reanimated labor. We can't just keep bodies lying around." "I said don't touch it," I snapped, surprising myself with the harshness. "There's something wrong here, something bigger than you or me. You just keep your nose clean and let me handle this." Lazarus mumbled something under his breath, but he didn't argue. He knew as well as anyone that the uneasy piece of veilstone was hanging by a very thin thread. Leaving the morgue, the stench of decay clinging to my clothes, I pulled my collar up against the sudden chill. Rain had turned to a light drizzle, the city streets slick and glistening under the weak midday sun. My thoughts raced, each suspicion leading to another dark possibility. What did this dead man with his glowing eyes and mysterious neck scar have to do with the creature in the alley? Who had the power and the twisted motive to manipulate life and death with such skill? I needed answers, and the Undercity was where I'd likely find them. The tunnels lay under the city like ancient rotten veins, a haven for those who chose the shadows over the dim mage-lit streets of Veilstone. Necromantic cults, smugglers, and worse all claimed territory in the subterranean labyrinth. Descending was a gamble, but sometimes you had to step into the darkness to find what was really lurking there. I made my way towards the market district, my boots splashing through puddles. The usual crowds had thinned under the dreary weather. Shouts of vendors hawking their wares felt muted, and there was a nervous energy in the air. Even before the first dead man walked from the morgue, Veilstone had been a tense city. The peace between the living and the animated dead was always fragile, dependent on the city councilman's promises and the steady flow of necromantic energy to keep the restless corpses obedient. Whispers in tavern corners told of growing discontent, the gnawing fear that someday the dead might rise in numbers too great to control. I pushed my way through the market square, ignoring the wary glances of fruit sellers and the sharp cries of fishmongers. I had a reputation, a stubborn detective clinging to the vestiges of a past order that no longer existed. These days, few welcomed a city ward mage at their doorstep. Fewer still wanted to be seen with him. A narrow alley behind a butcher's shop marked the entrance I was looking for. A single gas lamp marked the worn stone steps leading underground. They were slick with rainwater, treacherous, like the descent into the Undercity itself. Taking a deep breath, I gripped the iron railing and started down. The damp air grew colder, the smell of rot and mildew replacing the familiar scents of the market. Each step took me further away from the city I knew, deeper into a world of shadows and whispered secrets. The gaslight cast shadows on the uneven stone walls. The sound of dripping water cut through the stagnant air. I kept my hand on the hilt of my knife, my only true weapon in this realm. The stairs ended abruptly, opening into a vast cavern. Torches wavered in iron sconces, casting an unsteady light across the rough-hewn space. Water dripped from the ceiling, pooling on the stone floor and creating twisting streams that flowed into the darkness. Figures moved in the shadows, their outlines indistinct in the dim light. Ragged men and hunched forms huddled in corners, their eyes reflecting the torchlight like hungry animals. I tightened my grip on the knife hilt, my senses on high alert. One misstep here, one wrong word, could prove fatal. My reputation, however tarnished it might be, preceded me. The figures in the shadows shuffled back as I advanced, their voices dropping to low murmurs. They knew what I was, a ward mage, an upholder of a law that, down here, meant nothing. Taking a calculated risk, I raised my voice to carry through the cavern. "I'm looking for Malchus the Whisper." Silence. Then a shuffling sound emerged from the far end of the cavern. An old man, bent nearly double, emerged from the darkness. His skin was leathery and his hair wispy, but his eyes gleamed with unexpected sharpness. "Outsider comes to the Undercity," he rasped, his voice like cracking bones. "Bold or foolish?" "I come for information, Malchus," I said, keeping my tone level. Malchus was rumoured to be an information broker, his withered ears listening to half the whispered deals that crawled within the underbelly of Veilstone. If anyone knew anything about the strange forces at play, it would be him. "Information has a price," he wheezed, his gaze darting over me like a scavenger bird assessing a carcass. "What do you bring, ward mage?" I gritted my teeth. Malchus never accepted coin. He traded in favours in debts owed, and I knew it would be dangerous to be in his debt. But I didn't have a choice. I stepped closer, my voice low. "I offer you protection, Malchus. A ward mage's word carries weight, even here. Tell me what you know, and I'll keep your name off the reports, and out of the ears of those who might seek to silence you." The old man's eyes widened with interest. He knew better than anyone the precarious nature of survival in the Undercity. A slip of the tongue, a deal gone wrong, and you could disappear without a trace. He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Very well, ward mage. Come closer and Malchus will share what he knows." I followed Malchus deeper into the cavern, the stench of sewage and damp earth growing stronger with every step. He hobbled along, his gnarled staff tapping a relentless rhythm against the uneven stone floor. He didn't bother to glance back to see if I was following, and I kept my distance, wary of any sudden attack or hidden trap. Finally, we reached a secluded alcove, a small space lit by a single, sputtering torch. Malchus gestured towards a pile of crates stacked in the corner. "Sit," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. I sat, wincing as a stray splinter poked through the worn fabric of my trousers. Malchus settled himself onto a crate opposite me, his old bones creaking in protest. "You asked about strange happenings," he began, his voice like dry leaves whispering in the wind. "Whispers have reached even these forgotten corners, ward mage. Talk of men robed in black, gathering near the ancient catacombs." My blood ran cold. The catacombs, a vast network of tunnels beneath the city, rumoured to hold the remains of Veilstone's forgotten past, a place considered even by the Undercity dwellers to be dangerous and best left undisturbed. "What were they doing?" I asked, urgency tightening my voice. Malchus shrugged, the gesture conveying the limitations of his own knowledge. "Speak words of power, draw symbols on the ground. Dark magic, that's all I know. But they've been seen, muttering about bringing something back, something powerful." A chill crept up my spine. Was this connected to the glowing eyes in the alley, to the stitched corpse in the morgue? The pieces were starting to fit, but a horrifying picture was emerging. "When was this?" "Few nights past," Malchus rasped. "One of my associates witnessed it. Came running scared, wouldn't keep quiet." "Did they capture any words, any symbols?" Malchus shook his head, his frail frame racked with another fit of coughing. "Fragments, whispers of awakening, ancient power. That's all." Frustration gnawed at me. It wasn't enough. Names, details. I needed more, but I knew I wouldn't get anything further from Malchus. He had told me what he knew, and any further pressure might turn him hostile. Leaving Malchus in his shadowy alcove, I retraced my steps through the cavern. The whispers and stares of the Undercity dwellers seemed sharper now, laden with suspicion and a twisted curiosity. Reaching the crumbling stone steps, I started the long climb back to the surface world. With each step, a growing sense of dread settled over me. The rogue necromancer, the glowing eyes, the whispers of dark magic in the catacombs. It all pointed to something far worse than a power struggle between ambitious necromancers. Something ancient, perhaps, something buried deep beneath the city, was stirring. And if we couldn't stop it, the fragile peace of Veilstone wouldn't stand a chance. Emerging from the Undercity entrance, I found myself on the edge of the market once again. The faint glow of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of bruised orange and purple. Taking a deep breath, I scanned the bustling market square. The usual sights and sounds seemed muted, meaningless against the backdrop of the horror I now knew lurked beneath the city. I had answers, but they brought little comfort. It was time to warn Andras. He wouldn't be happy, especially about venturing into the catacombs. But this was bigger than a missing corpse or a rogue necromancer. This was a fight for the very soul of Veilstone, and I wouldn't be alone in it. Rain lashed against the window panes of Andras's office as I slammed the weathered report onto his desk. The mage light cast an orange pallor over his face, deepening the worry lines etched into his weathered skin. "Don't tell me it's another stiff with a hole punched through his chest," he grumbled, casting a tired glance at the report. "Worse, Captain," I said, my voice tight. I summarized the events, the cryptic information from Malchus, the whispers of dark magic near the catacombs, the strange body in the morgue. As I spoke, Andras's frown deepened. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose with a sigh. "A rogue necromancer messing around with the catacombs," he muttered. "Just what this city needs." "Something's being awakened, Captain," I pressed. "Something powerful." He met my gaze, his eyes hard. "Maybe, maybe not. Malchus is a gossip, feeds on rumors and fear like a sewer rat on garbage." "He wouldn't lie about something like this," I argued. "Not with the way things are, not when everyone's on edge." Andras sighed again, rubbing his hand over his face. All right. Fine. We check it out. Just another stroll through a death-infested labyrinth for old time's sake, eh, Kane?" There was a hint of humor in his voice, a grim camaraderie born of years spent facing the city's dark underbelly. I didn't smile. "We need to gear up," I said, already heading for the door. "Holy water, firebombs, maybe even some of those archaic silver weapons the archives keep in storage." "Silver?" Andras snorted. "Those things are museum pieces, Kane. Likely more brittle than a stale scone." "Better than going in with just our fists," I retorted. "Whatever we're facing, it won't be human." He grunted in agreement, rising to his feet. "Fine. You grab the fancy religious liquids, I'll dig up some decent weaponry. And be careful, Kane." For the first time that day, concern crossed his stoic face. "This isn't just another investigation. This could get messy." "We both know that," I replied, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. "But someone has to take the first step into the darkness." We moved in a grim silence, our boots making hollow sounds in the deserted hallways of the city ward headquarters. The rain kept up its relentless drumming on the roof, a melancholy counterpoint to the tension building within me. Descending into the armory felt like entering a tomb. Dust motes danced in the dim light, illuminating rows of rusty weapons hung on chipped racks. Andras rummaged through a heavy chest, pulling out a pair of dented battle axes. He tossed one to me, the heft of it feeling reassuringly familiar in my hand. "Best I could find," he grunted, inspecting a heavy crossbow with a critical eye. "Good enough," I muttered, checking the worn leather straps on my pack. Inside lay a few vials of cloudy holy water, a coil of rope, and a collection of flint and steel for creating fire. My paltry arsenal, barely enough to face the shambling masses we dealt with daily, let alone whatever lurked in the catacombs. We finished packing in silence, a heavy sense of foreboding settling over us. As we stepped back out onto the rain-slicked streets, a gust of wind howled through the deserted alleys, carrying with it the chilling scent of decay and something else. A faint, unnatural hum, almost inaudible but impossible to ignore. It emanated from the direction of the ancient catacombs. We exchanged a look, both faces grim. The whispers, the cryptic warnings, the strange occurrences. They all converged on that direction. With a deep breath, I adjusted my pack and tightened my grip on the axe. There was no turning back now. The secrets of the catacombs awaited, and whatever horrors they held, We were about to face them head-on. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and heavy with a cloying dampness. The entrance to the catacombs was a gaping maw in the side of a crumbling hill, its jagged black opening promising an oppressive darkness beyond. A cold wind emanated from the opening, carrying with it the same unnatural hum I'd felt earlier. It pounded against my eardrums, a low, rhythmic thrumming that sent goosebumps erupting across my skin. Andras, a stoic figure silhouetted against the faint city lights, hefted his crossbow and gestured towards the entrance. "Ready when you are, Kane." My hand tightened around the grip of my axe. Prepared? Not really, but fear was a poison we couldn't afford to drink. With a nod, I stepped forward. The descent was treacherous. Crumbling stone steps led down into the yawning darkness, slick with moisture and overgrown with fetid moss. We relied on the light cast by Andras's mage light, the blue orb struggling to pierce the depths of the ancient tunnels. Silence, broken only by the crunch of our boots on loose gravel, pressed down on us. The rhythmic hum grew louder, a constant presence that vibrated through the very bones. It was unsettling, malevolent, a song of dark power rising from the bowels of the earth. We pressed deeper, following the faint glow of fungi clinging to the damp walls. The tunnels twisted and turned, a labyrinth carved into the living rock by long-forgotten hands. A sudden shift in the air made me pause. The faint scent of decay, a stale, cloying sweetness, replaced the earthy mustiness. Andras raised his crossbow, his movements silent and practiced. We rounded a bend. There, in the center of a vast cavern, stood a monolith of black obsidian. Strange symbols, glowing with an unnatural purple light, surged across its surface. And kneeling before the monolith, chanting in a low, guttural tongue, was a figure clad in black robes. He faced away from us, but even from a distance I could sense the raw power radiating from him. "Necromancer," Andras hissed, his voice barely a whisper, "and a powerful one at that." The figure's head snapped up, revealing a face hidden in the shadows of the hood. Two glowing red orbs, burning with malevolent intelligence, locked onto ours. He spoke, his voice a rasping whisper that filled the cavern. "You dare disturb the awakening!" I gripped my axe tighter, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This wasn't just about rogue reanimation anymore. This was about something far more dangerous, something that threatened to unhinge the fragile balance of the city. We had stumbled upon a ritual, a dark ceremony aimed at unleashing something ancient and terrible. Our meager weapons felt insignificant against the power emanating from the glowing monolith. "We don't want trouble," Andras called out, his voice surprisingly steady. "Just stop what you're doing and come quietly." The necromancer laughed, a chilling sound that scraped against the cavern walls. "Fools! You cannot stop the inevitable. The Devourer rises, and Veilstone will be its first feast." His voice rose to a crescendo as he slammed his palm onto the obsidian monolith. The purple runes flared, bathing the cavern in an unholy light. The floor began to tremble, a low rumble rising from the depths. Cracks appeared in the walls, growing wider with each passing second. Dust and debris rained down from the crumbling ceiling. "We have to stop him, Kane!" Andras yelled over the roar. "I know!" I shouted back, adrenaline surging through me. This was it. This was our fight, a desperate gamble against an overwhelming force. With a battle cry, I charged towards the necromancer. Andras let loose a bolt from his crossbow, the arrow flying true, but shattering harmlessly against a barrier that had sprung up around the robed figure. I reached the edge of the light emanating from the monolith, the heat singeing my face. The necromancer turned towards me, a sneer twisting his features. Raising his hands, he unleashed a torrent of dark energy. I rolled to the side, the blast searing the stone where I had stood a moment before. Scrambling to my feet, I swung my axe at him. It connected with a sickening crunch, but not the way I expected. The barrier had warped, twisting away the blow, and the force of it reverberated up my arm, nearly making me drop the weapon. The necromancer cackled amidst the chaos of the collapsing cavern. You fight a futile battle, Ward Mage. Your feeble resistance means nothing. He raised his hands again, this time crackling arcs of darkness lashed out, searing the air with the stench of ozone. I dodged, leaping back, but the ground beneath me gave way, crumbling like brittle sandstone. With a sickening lurch, I felt myself falling. I clawed at the edge, but my fingers only found loose gravel. I tumbled into the darkness, the light above fading rapidly. Pain exploded in my shoulder as I slammed into a hard surface. I gasped, my vision swimming as I struggled to get my bearings. The sounds of the collapsing cavern and the necromancer's maniacal laughter faded into the distance. Frantically, I fumbled for Andras's mage light, my fingers finally closing around the cool orb. With a trembling hand, I activated it, a weak bubble of blue light dispelling the worst of the terrifying blackness. I had fallen into a narrow side tunnel, its walls wet and slimy. My entire body ached, and I feared I'd broken something. But the floor felt solid, and the passage seemed to stretch further into the darkness. Desperation gave me a final burst of energy. I struggled to my feet, ignoring the protesting twinges of pain. The rhythmic throbbing hum, the necromancer's heartbeat, grew stronger with each step, guiding me deeper into the unknown. Up ahead, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. There, nestled amongst cracked ribs and mouldering skulls, was the stitched corpse from the morgue, its chest glowing with an unnatural crimson light. Its eyes were open, the crimson glow reflecting in its empty sockets like hellfire. It lay atop a circular stone altar, strange runes carved into its surface, thrumming with dark energy. Panic surged through me, a primal, icy fear that had nothing to do with the pain from my fall. This wasn't just a simple reanimation. This was something far worse. A perversion of life and death. A vessel for the ancient power the necromancer had spoken of. Suddenly the corpse twitched. Its chest heaved with an unnatural breath, and a guttural moan escaped its rotting lips. I stumbled back, my axe raised in a feeble defense. "Behold!" a voice rasped from behind me. "The herald of the devourer!" I whirled, barely spotting the dark shape before it lunged. The necromancer slammed into me, knocking the axe from my hand, his glowing eyes burning with fanatical fervor. We wrestled to the ground, grappling in the dim light. His body was surprisingly strong, his strength fueled by a twisted kind of magic. His hands clawed at my throat, his breath a foul, fetid wind against my cheek. "The city will burn!" he shrieked, spittle flying from his lips. "The dead will feast on the flesh of the living, and your soul will be the devourer's first offering." Desperation spiked within me. With a surge of strength, I pushed him away, scrambling for the fallen axe. I swung wildly, more an act of panic than a calculated blow, but it connected. The necromancer let out a strangled cry as the blade buried itself in his side. He staggered back, clutching the wound, a look of shocked disbelief on his face. Dark blood seeped between his fingers, staining his robes. I stumbled to my feet, gasping for breath. This was it, our chance. Before the necromancer could recover, I lunged forward, thrusting the axe towards his chest. Time seemed to slow. His eyes widened in horror as the blade plunged straight into his heart. There was a final gasp, a flash of darkness in his eyes, and then he slumped to the ground, a broken puppet. For a moment there was only silence. The crimson glow in the corpse's chest sputtered and went out. I was filled with an overwhelming sense of relief, but also a creeping dread. What had we just stopped? What was the devourer, and was its awakening truly thwarted? My thoughts were cut short when a muffled roar from above pierced the tunnels. The sound of collapsing stone and the hollow scream of Andras sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I had to get out of here, had to find Andras. Grabbing the mage light, I scrambled back up the narrow tunnel, the ground shaking violently beneath my feet. The catacombs were collapsing, entombing their secrets and horrors for another age. Perhaps forever. I clambered through the crumbling tunnel, the faint blue glow from the mage light casting shadows on the damp walls. The roar of collapsing stone grew louder with each frantic step, the confined space amplifying the sound. Panic gnawed at me, urging me on even as my injured shoulder screamed in protest. There was no time to search for an escape route. I had to find the main tunnel, find Andras. Finally, I stumbled back out into the vast cavern. The once majestic space was now a scene of utter chaos. Chunks of rock rained down from the gaping maw of the ceiling, blocking the entrance I'd descended through. Andras was nowhere to be seen. A choked sound escaped my lips. Despair threatened to engulf me, but movement in the corner of my eye gave me a sliver of hope. Andras, his face grim and bloodied, lay half buried under a pile of debris. His crossbow lay shattered at his side, and a deep gash ran across his forehead. "Andras!" I roared, adrenaline masking the searing pain in my shoulder as I scrambled towards him. He looked up, his eyes glazed with pain. "Kane!" he rasped, his voice weak. "Get out! Before it—" The ground lurched violently, another massive chunk of rock crashing down, severing his words. Panic surged through me. I couldn't just leave him, but the cavern was collapsing around us. There was no time for heroics. With a last desperate look at Andras, I grabbed the mage light, its warmth a fleeting comfort in the encroaching darkness. Spotting a narrow tunnel at the edge of the cavern, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through, I scrambled towards it. Dust and debris rained down as I squeezed through the opening, the scraping stone grating through the collapsing chamber. Behind me, the cavern groaned, the sound of falling rock a deafening roar. I closed my eyes tight, bracing for the impact, for the suffocating darkness. But it never came. After a long, agonizing moment, the sound of falling rock subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. I opened my eyes, blinking back the tears and grit that stung them. I was on the other side of the tunnel, safe. Exhaustion overwhelmed me, a wave of crushing weight that threatened to drag me down. But the adrenaline was fading fast, replaced by a bone-deep ache and a chilling realization. I was alone. "Andras!" A sob escaped my throat, a raw, primal sound of grief and despair. He had sacrificed himself, giving me a chance to escape. Gathering the last dregs of my strength, I pushed myself to my feet. Tears streamed down my face, clouding my vision. But I knew I couldn't give in to despair. I had to get out of the catacombs, had to tell the council what had happened, what horrors they had narrowly avoided. The rest of the climb passed in a fog of pain and exhaustion. Each step felt like a monumental effort, but I wouldn't allow myself to stop. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I stumbled back out into the familiar darkness of the Undercity. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and damp. The sight of the filthy alleyway had never been so welcoming. Heaving through ragged breaths, I stumbled towards the gas lamp that marked the entrance to the upper city. My escape wasn't unnoticed. A hulking figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby building, clad in tattered leathers and wielding a wicked-looking cleaver. "Easy there, friend," he growled, blocking my path. "Lost something down below?" I ignored the glint of greed in his eyes, my voice hoarse and ragged. "Get Ward, Mage." The words came out in a broken whisper, but the man seemed to understand. His eyes widened in recognition, and fear replaced the avarice. "Ward Mage," he stammered, taking a nervous step back. You come from the catacombs." I managed a weak nod, my body screaming for rest. News of the Ward Mage's escape from the collapsing catacombs spread like wildfire. By the time I stumbled back into headquarters, bruised, battered, and barely conscious, I was met with a mixture of shock, relief, and morbid curiosity. The council, grim-faced and shaken, listened as I recounted the details of my descent. The necromancer, the ritual, the monstrous awakening. "The Devourer," muttered one of the council members, an elderly mage with a long beard. "An ancient evil, thought to be nothing more than a myth." Despite the pain, the exhaustion, I pushed on, my voice gaining strength despite its raggedness. Myth or not, it posed a very real threat, and this won't be the last time we face such darkness, I said, meeting the council's collective gaze with unwavering determination. What of Andras? The question hung heavy in the suddenly quiet room. I looked at the floor, the memory of Andras buried under the debris of the collapsing cavern, a sharp pang in my chest. He's gone. He saved my life, to give me time to escape. The room held a sigh, heavy with the weight of loss felt by all. Andras had been a loyal ward mage, a gruff but kind man. His death was a heavy blow, a harsh reminder of the sacrifices demanded in this grim battle against the rising tide of darkness. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The catacombs were sealed, teams of mages and engineers working tirelessly to reinforce the remaining tunnels, desperate to contain the traces of whatever horror stirred beneath. The council, shaken out of their complacency, poured resources into strengthening the city ward, their fear a tangible force within the stone walls of their meeting halls. As for me, I couldn't stop. Not with the knowledge that the monstrous corpse, the failed vessel of the devourer, had been merely a taste of things to come. My sleep was invaded by nightmares of glowing red eyes and the monstrous guttural promise of a city devoured. I pored over ancient texts, scraps of forbidden knowledge and whispered rumors scraped from the darkest corners of the Undercity. I trained relentlessly with any mage or warrior willing to share their skills, honing my body and mind into a weapon. I became an obsession embodied. The detective, once content to investigate strange corpses or track down missing artifacts, was gone. In his place, a hunter was born, a guardian standing against the tide of darkness. The people of Veilstone looked at me with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Whispers followed me through the narrow streets and bustling market squares. The catacomb survivor, or the touched by death. I welcomed the fear. They had slept complacently for too long, lulled into a false sense of security by the wards and the monotonous shuffle of the reanimated. Now, a tremor had shaken their world, a glimpse into the abyss granted to them by the sacrifice of good men. If fear led to vigilance, if it fueled preparation, then it was a price I was willing to pay. One rainy night, standing on a rain-slick rooftop overlooking the sleeping city, I heard a faint sound, a barely audible hum rising from the depths. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I knew that sound, the heartbeat of the devourer, still waiting, seething beneath the city's skin. I clutched the hilt of my blade, the scars on my hands aching in sympathy with the city's hidden wounds. The devourer was not defeated, merely delayed. Our fight was far from over. The dark forces would return, perhaps stronger, perhaps in a guise we were yet to comprehend. But I would be ready. Grim determination settled in my chest. The city would need more than wards and shambling guardians. It would need heroes, those willing to pay any price, endure any sacrifice to shield it from the devouring darkness. And I would be there to answer the call, even if the path ahead was stained in darkness, even if the cost was my very soul.